Alright, what's up guys? So today we're going to be talking about aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Specifically in this video, we're going to be talking about aggregate demand and why it's downward sloping. And it's downward sloping for three reasons, which we're going to cover in this video. The number one reason is wealth effect, number two is interest rate effect, and number three is the foreign trade effect. Now, when we talk about aggregate demand or aggregate supply, we're talking about the demand of all the products in the economy as a whole. Same thing with supply. We're talking about the supply of all the products in the economy as a whole. Specifically in this video for aggregate demand is made up of our consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. This is supposed to be very familiar with everybody because this is the same equation for GDP. So aggregate demand is made up of these four factors. And so now that we're talking about aggregate demand, we're not only talking about a micro concept, just not a micro concept of the law of demand when price levels increase, our demand decreases, but we're talking about it as an economy as a whole. And because we're talking about the whole economy, there are a multitude of other reasons why our demand curve is downward sloping, and a bunch of other relationships we need to know when it comes to shifting this aggregate demand curve. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the wealth effect. So as price levels increase, and I guess I can draw this out. Let me pick red. Let's say a price level here was $5, and it went up to $10. Okay? So if we label the point on our curve, we know that the quantity demanded at our $5 would be somewhere around here. But the quantity demanded at $10 would be around here. And I guess I can call this P1 and P0. And this is quantity demanded 1 and quantity demanded 0. All right, so we clearly see that our quantity demanded decreases, and I think we can make that assumption based off of what we know from microeconomics. As price level goes up, our demand goes down. But there are other reasons why our aggregate demand has that same type of relationship in a macroeconomic context. The first reason is the wealth effect. So as your price level increases, your purchasing power, that means for every single person in the whole economy, let's say of the United States in this example, will have less purchasing power. That means, let's say, and I'll be shifting to a micro example. Let's say that we had a kid named Philip, and he bought oranges for $5, and now it's $10. So back then, when he bought oranges for $5, he would get, let's say, a bag of oranges. But now, if he paid the same $5, it wouldn't be as valuable because he would need $5 more to pay for that extra bag of oranges. So if we blow that up into a macro example, that's going to be the general way of how people will start to react when price levels increase in the economy. When price levels increase, people as a whole have less purchasing power, meaning that their wealth, that means their wealth denoted by the W, will decrease because their dollar will have less value because all the price levels have increased, and in a macro example, the price levels usually increase because of inflation. So price levels increase, your wealth would decrease, and if your wealth decreases, you're going to spend less. So you're going to spend less, you're going to consume less. Your consumption will decrease, and that would mean that your aggregate demand will decrease. Why is that? Well, we know that aggregate demand is made up of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. If your consumption goes down, you know your aggregate demand as a whole will go down as well. The second reason is the interest rate effect. So as price levels increase, and price levels usually increase, remember, in macroeconomics due to inflation. So if price levels increase, our interest rates will also increase. And think about it. If inflation is occurring all around you, banks will want to increase their interest rates so that, let's say, if they give you $1,000 in 2001, If you give back that $1,000 in 2008, their interest rates can pile up so that the $1,000 that you give back will be the same value, and that inflation rates won't affect it as much. So if inflation goes up, then your interest rates, then banks will increase their interest rates. And I guess I should also mention that here. So if price levels go up, your inflation rates also go up, and that means that banks will give you a higher interest rate. And if banks give you a higher interest rate, people are not going to want to invest as much because there's going to be a huge interest rate that they have to pile on to the money that they already have to give back. So people will invest, which is denoted by the I. People will invest less. And if people invest less, the aggregate demand will decrease because we know that aggregate demand is also made up of investment. Number 3, foreign trade effect. The foreign trade effect also brings out the macroeconomic nature of aggregate demand because now we're going to be talking about trade with other nations. So if our price level increases due to inflation, let's say, other nations won't want to trade with us as much, okay? Because our price level has increased. That means when other nations want to import our goods, it will cost a higher price. So that means that in the United States, our level of exports will decrease. Okay? And I know that's kind of confusing, but if our price level goes up, then other nations won't want to buy from us as much because our price level has went up. And if our price level goes up and other nations don't want to buy with us, we domestically can't export that many goods because people don't want to buy from it. So our exports go down, and if our exports go down, our net exports have to go down because we know that net exports is equal to exports minus imports. So if our exports are going down, then our net exports must also go down. So if our net exports also go down, then our aggregate demand will also go down. And these are all the 3 reasons why, in a macroeconomic context, why the aggregate demand is downward sloping. Thank you for watching the video, and in the next video we'll be explaining why certain shifts occur to the aggregate demand curve. Thank you.